So you're down in Southern California. What did you know about Jesus? Was your family religious?
Well, the family religion not by choice, I was brought into was Catholic because of my mother's family. The Filipinos are very Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that, but didn't understand anything because they spoke Latin. The priest spoke Latin back in those days. And I kind of followed the bells and with the altar boys. And then when you drop to your knees, I would just look at the person next to me and go down because I didn't understand what they were saying.
Okay.
You know, it was hard.
So meaning just the order of service, what
Right,
to do,
right.
when to stand up.
And basically I
Yeah.
went because for my mother.
Yes.
And then I did the catechism. Didn't care for that. People talked about how sisters back in those days were mean. They were just strict.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what people did. Like in school, teachers were more strict,
Sure.
which I thought was a good thing
Right.
because it got your attention,
Right.
you know,
Right.
and you paid more respect to them, and then they respected you.
Did you go
But
to school at a Catholic school?
no,
You
no,
just mean that you were around the sisters for your
just the
catechism
church on
classes?
Sunday, and
Okay.
I believe catechism was either Wednesday or Thursday.
Okay. And just for anyone who doesn't know, catechism is
It's basically like a school, more or less, to teach you the word, which you're a young kid, you don't.
yeah.
They take. It's hard to explain because it was so long ago. I don't remember much of it,
Sure.
but it's kind of like a Bible school, I guess you
Yes.
could say
Yes.
it. But you know,
Yes.
and you know, I did the confession thing, and like I said, I could never understand why I would have to tell my sins to a father
Mm-hmm.
so God could forgive me. I could never understand that. I couldn't understand why can't I ask him myself.
So were you praying yourself to
Yes, we
the
did.
Father?
We prayed every night. Of course,
Yeah.
you know, my parents, you know, my brother and I would get down on our hands and knees and pray.
Mm-hmm.
And we did that, but I don't remember when all of a sudden that disappeared.
Mm-hmm. When you were growing up, it wasn't that way.
No,
your
I
whole-
could probably all that Catholic stuff probably disappeared when I was maybe 10 or 11, maybe
Okay.
12.
Okay.
And then I was a kid and
Mm-hmm.
did kid things.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say your impression of who God was at that time?
My impression of God when I was young was somebody that was really big, but
Mhm.
I didn't understand him. I didn't know much about him
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't really pay attention in the Catholic part
Mm-hmm.
back then because of the Latin. I didn't understand that.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
they spoke in Latin.
Mm-hmm.
And then they spoke in English too, but by the time they spoke scripture or whatever in Latin, I had no clue what's
Mm-hmm.
going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I was basically there as respect for my mother.
Okay.
I didn't learn anything.
Okay. Okay. So what changed? When did you meet Jesus? Do you want to talk about life
Yes,
before that? Or?
when I was going through elementary school, and by the time I got to junior high school, 7th grade, I met a friend. I became a friend with, and his name was Lonnie Frisbee.
I've heard of that name.
Right, and he loved to dance back in those days, and he was an artist. His parents lived in Costa Mesa, but at the time, he was living with his grandparents, and
Okay.
I didn't know that. I didn't understand what that was all about. But we hung out, and there was an old dance show called Shebang
On
with
TV?
Casey Kasem, yeah, on TV. And Lonnie danced on that show a lot of times with other people and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Then one time he dragged myself up there with a bunch of people, and we got to meet Casey Kasem and danced on the Shebang show. First time on TV with Lonnie.
Was it a big deal?
Yeah, it was, you know, dancing was a big deal back in those days and
Yeah.
in the 60s and stuff. And, but I remember Lonnie had a little sports car. I can't remember if it was a Triumph or an MG or something, but we go cruising up and down Coast Highway and hit all the little dancing spots.
Okay.
and go
He's still
dancing.
dancing today?
Yeah. So, anyways, we hung out. We hung out at the beach and stuff like that. And I remember one time, Lonnie came over to my parents' house. He wanted to talk to me, so he came in my bedroom and stuff. He goes, "Hey, I want to take you over to my grandparents because I want you to try something." So I went over there, and he turned me on to weed.
Okay.
So I smoked that, and it was really, you have to know Lonnie to understand. He was charismatic,
Hmm.
and he was just a very happy
Hmm.
person. And he would, when he got you involved in something, he'd go through all the actions of it, trying to make you feel comfortable at all times, and this and that.
He's a good
And
friend.
I believe I was 14, maybe 15 at the time.
Okay.
And then I kind of, that period of life kind of just, we stopped hanging out for a little bit. He kind of actually disappeared.
Okay.
By the time I was 15, I didn't see him.
Okay.
But that's when he went up north. Or
Okay.
actually, he went to San Francisco and all that when I found out later.
Is he the same age?
Pardon
Was
me?
he the same age as you?
He was a year, maybe a year and a half older than
Okay.
me.
So when you're talking about like driving and going
Yeah,
to the dance
he was
things,
old. Yeah, he was old enough to drive.
oh, okay,
So
okay,
he's probably a year older than me,
okay,
maybe two.
okay,
But I remember, I need to back up a little bit. I
sure,
got involved in music because my father was a drummer.
okay,
And ever since I was little, I was always attracted to the sound of the drums through marching bands and etc. So I played music in the bands in junior high school. I wound up playing in the orchestra, and then when I got into eighth grade, I wound up playing in the orchestra, the Dixieland band, and the jazz band.
wow,
And so when the '60s came around and the Beatles came out, everybody wanted to be the Beatles.
hmm,
We'll call it the European invasion of music.
okay,
Well, of course, we had our garage bands and all that, and my parents were very supportive of that. Our house was the only house that our garage was available to practice
okay,
in, and my mom was like a dead mother. She'd bring out cookies and milk to everybody. Oh, well, you guys sound great, and this and that. And we'd
hmm.
play at, high school venues and this and that.
Did your brother play too?
Yeah, my brother was a drummer, and he they got pretty good and things like that. And there was a producer at the time named Michael Curb, who wound up being the lieutenant governor for California
Okay,
at one time.
okay,
Produced my brother's band, but then when you're young like that, things happen.
yeah,
You don't think straight. So I remember I had started a band, and my brother stole the guitar player of my band, and I had a resentment on that. And I remembered that I had a friend, Bruce Cotton, and we were childhood friends forever. He was in the band. He used to play saxophone, and one day he picked up the bass, so we started jamming, and we met some other people and played. And we used to rent these huge warehouses from this Swedish guy, Mr. Thurston was his name, or Thunstrom, something like that.
hmm,
And there was 4 bands that rented these places and practiced, and we started meeting other musicians.
hmm.
And Bruce Cotton and I both turned to the Lord together one day. We were down at the beach, and all of a sudden Lonnie Frisbee pops in.
Mm,
Yes, he was wearing all white. He had long hair and a beard.
hmm.
And I went, "Is that you, Lonnie?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "You look like Jesus." Just joking around. And he goes, "Well, I'm a changed person. I'm a changed man." And he says, "I got married, and I want you to meet my wife." Well, right on Newport Boulevard, there used to be, I guess at one time it was a Blue Note because they had blue tops hotels,
Hmm.
motels or whatever, but they turned them into little 1 bedroom apartments with a little kitchenette. Some of them had 2 bedrooms,
Hmm.
and he lived in one of those.
Hmm.
So I went up and met his wife, and that's when he started confessing to me, talking to me about Jesus.
Hmm.
This was in April of 1968. Well, that day my whole life changed. I accepted Christ in my life. And to this day, Nothing has hit me more powerful than accepting the Lord into my heart. That day, it knocked me flat on my back,
Literally.
with just the most warmth I've ever felt,
Mm-hmm.
happiness just boiling over me, and I couldn't move. But I wasn't afraid because
Mm-hmm.
I knew it was all good.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, I remember Lonnie reaching down, and I thought it was Jesus reaching down and pulling me up and goes, "You okay, brother?" He goes, "That feeling you felt, you just accepted God in your life, and He's entered your life.
Mm-hmm.
Your life will completely change from now on."
Mm-hmm.
And then when that progressed, he took me down to where Pastor Chuck was,
Mm-hmm. To the church.
Pastor Chuck Smith. Calvary Chapel wasn't in existence at the time.
Okay.
What I can remember is that I believe it was Bay Street. Like I said, it's a long time ago,
Okay.
but I remember this church he was at. If you walked out or looked out where the altar was, out through the window, you could see the bay,
Oh.
Newport Harbor.
Yeah.
And I remember preaching there. I remember watching this man, Chuck Smith, just glow. And he was so calm. And of course, back in those days, we all had long hair, hippies, and all that. And I looked around in the room, and there was a lot of us like that in there. And I saw some elderly people in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, wow, this is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
So it went on, and then I got involved in Bible studies more and more. And it seemed like we were going to 2 Bible studies a week,
Mm-hmm.
church on Sunday. And the next thing I know, God bless Pastor Chuck
Mm-hmm.
with some property
Mm-hmm.
over off of Fairview Drive, right across from Fairview Mental State Hospital,
Mm-hmm.
is where the dirt was brought up and the very first Calvary Chapel was built.
Wow. So let's talk a little bit about what that looked like internally for you to have met Jesus. You.
Internally, it changed me. I had conflict with friends
Mm-hmm.
because I was glowing with something new in my life that I've never experienced before.
Mm-hmm.
And I would preach, hey, I didn't realize it was preaching at the time, but I would tell them, you gotta check this out. You need to come see these people,
Mm-hmm.
talk to them. You need to come see this pastor.
Mm-hmm.
He's amazing. And some of my high school friends or people I knew would, and some of them, of course, turned away. But I remember how God worked in my life because He started putting me in places. I had no idea why,
Mm-hmm.
but I'd be in these places. There used to be place, I think it was on 18th Street in Newport Beach, where we could go in, and I believe the guy that ran that place was named Mike, and he had all the Jesus bumper stickers. And in that movie, what was that movie called?
Jesus Revolution.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
remember where they were handing out the pamphlet things that Greg Laurie made?
Oh, the
Yeah,
cartoons books.
but all I remember in that is that we'd go down there and get these little red Bibles.
Okay.
We'd get handfuls and put them in our pockets,
Yeah.
and we'd go around handing them out
Huh?
to everybody. Walk down the boardwalk, beach, go down to the fun zone, hand them out there,
Yeah.
and then we'd come back around and pick up the ones people would just drop or throw away,
Okay.
and do the same thing again.
Yeah.
I remember that. I remember getting bumper stickers. I remember my mom being very happy and grateful that my life kind of changed around,
Mm-hmm.
and she gave me her Bible.
Yeah.
And I still have that Bible today,
Yeah.
which I handed down to my daughter.
Okay.
And it's got all my little notes in there. It's got my Jesus Save bumper stickers in there. And that's something that I hope she reads someday.
Right.
And it's the old King James version, but it's,
Mm-hmm.
I always tell my daughter, just read the red if you want
Mm-hmm.
answers. And, but it changed my life tremendously, but I didn't realize that. I didn't realize the stuff going on in my life was making me not only a better person, but a person closer to our Creator.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize that until I started going to these Bible studies and learning His Word and bringing friends in and seeing them accepting the Lord and feeling that power of them laying on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
I remember God gifted me with the tongues, speaking in tongues.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't understand what tongues were at first. And then Lonnie explained that to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was okay with that. I thought maybe, whoa, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's my personal prayer to God, and that's just between God and myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so long ago, but I continued with that for a while. Now back to the music thing, which this is part of this my story,
Mm-hmm.
is that Bruce Cotton left because he accepted the Lord and he wanted to do more acousticals because they didn't have worship music back when um, when I accepted Christ. It was we all sang, we sang
Hymns.
all traditional hymns and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The whole congregation sang.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we might have had somebody on the keyboard or acoustic guitar that would lead us,
Mm-hmm.
but the whole congregation worship
Mm-hmm.
like it's supposed to be now. But now you have a team that gets you
Mm-hmm.
going, and I never realized they had worship teams until years later. But Bruce left the band, and so well, actually, he was still in the band, and the band next door to where we were practicing, the guitar player came over, and I said, "Randy, how you doing?" He says, "Good." Well, my band just broke up. I said, "I'm looking for a guitar player. Would you care to join?"
Mm-hmm.
Well, this person rounded up Randy Love. He was a cousin of the Beach Boys,
Okay.
Mike Love and the Wilson brothers. So we got together and we met this bass player from Watsonville.
Mm-hmm.
He came in the band and we started writing our own music and we became really popular all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden. You know, I don't know if that was a God shot thing or not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say it was or it wasn't because
Sure.
I'm not sure at that time.
Yeah.
And then as the Spirit was leading me, a lot of the songs that the bass player would write and we'd help rearrange them, I said, we need to change these lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, what do you mean? Because he accepted Christ and so did Randy
Okay.
in the band. I remember that. And I said, we need to praise God. I said, we can keep the music as heavy as we want.
Mm-hmm.
And he got a little upset about that because I mean I can understand creativity that you wrote this. I get that,
Sure.
but I was into we need to worship Him through our music.
Mm-hmm.
But that never panned out, and they wanted to fire me.
Okay.
So they did, and then a concert promoter set us up to go open up over at not UC Davis, but UCI, University Campus of Irvine.
Mm-hmm.
They did a lot of outdoor concerts there to open up for the band Love and Lee Michaels. And they said, yeah. And I said, well, you guys fired me. I'm not going to play that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they begged me. And so I gave in. And the next thing I know, there was music producers coming and promoters, club owners that came up and grabbed us. And I wound up backsliding
Mm-hmm.
because, hey,
Right.
it's all about me now. It's all about us. God, you can wait.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened is we wound up playing in this nightclub, very popular nightclub, where we would have lines all the way out the street for people to come and see us. And we played there 5 nights a week. That's when you can make a decent living. And I was only 17 at the time this was
Wow.
going on.
Wow.
And then Mike Love would come in with a famous surfer named David Nueva.
Okay.
And I knew David from days when I was surfing, but I never met him
You knew of
like I
him.
did now.
Yeah.
And so Mike Love would talk to us and he'd take us out to dinner. And he was a vegetarian, so he'd take us out to this place in LA called Help. In the meantime, I'm feeling, what is this going on here? I wasn't really certain.
Mm-hmm.
So next thing I know, we're in the Beach Boys studio at Brian Wilson's house
Okay.
recording. So I'm going to just go fast forward. All this stuff happened. Carl Wilson pulled us in his office, said, "Hey, I want to produce you guys, get you in the studio, but the Beach Boys are going on tour for 6 weeks or something in Europe." And he says, "I'll put you in the studio when we get back." Well, our manager at the time was from Texas. He says, "No, I'm going to put you in the studio in Austin." As young kids, oh, okay. No, we should have stuck with Carl Wilson, and we didn't.
Okay.
So we went to a place called Sono Beat Records in Austin, Texas, where Johnny Winter recorded his first album. So we did a demo. We did, I think it was 8 songs or 9 songs. And our manager paid for it all. He had it printed on vinyl, and it was just a white album cover with the name Wildfire Smoking, and it was numbered 1 through 1,000. He made 1,000 copies.
Okay.
He used that as a promotion to give to the record companies in LA. Well, they took a bunch of copies to places in Newport Beach, not Newport Beach, Laguna Beach, excuse me. It was called the Sound Spectrum. They were a hippie shop and a record shop.
Mm-hmm.
And he gave them like 30 copies, and they sold so fast. And then he did it again. Well, all this time we were touring in California, Texas, I believe Oklahoma, and a couple other places.
Mm-hmm.
And we were pretty busy. And all of a sudden, the band just broke up.
Mm.
Or actually, I got fired.
Okay.
That's what happened.
Okay.
But the band wound up breaking up eventually because they tried to do it other ways.
Yeah.
So, and this is how God was working in my life. Because I was kind of depressed. I remember sitting on the beach and telling some of my friends, well, the band broke up. Well, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. You know, and I was bummed because it's, you know, your ego, you know, gets all messed up. And then I happened to go to that nightclub we were playing at, and I ran into an old friend of mine that was a roadie for a band up in Washington State.
Okay.
He comes in and goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Nothing. The band broke up." He goes, "Oh, really?" I go, "What are you doing?" Oh, it says, "We're just down here playing at a couple of places. We're heading back in 2 days." Well, within 2 weeks, I get a call from that band,
Mm-hmm.
and it was from a drummer that was my idol back in those days.
Okay.
And he says, "I want you to come play drums for our band." I said, "What do you play drums for your band? You're the greatest drummer around." He goes, "Well, I'm playing guitar and singing now,
Oh, okay.
and I want you."
Yeah.
So they flew me up there, and next thing you know, I'm doing that. So that lasted a while. Another company saw us. They flew us down, and we did a 45 down in Los Angeles. And I think I got a couple of airtime on the radio up there. And then I went back to Texas, and then I came back to Southern California, started getting it into my disease, they call it.
So in all of this musical success, um, I remember at the beginning you said, "Hey, you know, our lyrics should be different. We should be
Right.
praising the Lord," and you know, you got pushback, and then with the success, that conversation went away, right?
That conversation completely went away, and I wound up doing what I call the devil wanted to do.
Okay.
At the time, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
You know, I call it the committee in the head. This is where the devil likes to sit down with his board members,
Mm-hmm.
and this is his best weapon on us. He can't touch us here.
Mm-hmm.
Once we accept Christ in ourselves, Christ owns our heart.
Yeah.
Here, the devil can mess with us as much as he wants,
Yeah.
and we have to stop listening to that. So, anyways, all that stuff went away, and I started just more or less stepping away.
Mm-hmm.
I always believed in God. Don't get me wrong. I believed in God. I always believed that He was around. But this is what I need to do. What I need to do.
Okay.
It's called the selfishness, self-will,
Mm-hmm.
and we all know now self-will gets us in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not God's will, we shouldn't do it,
Mm-hmm.
but we still do. And so that went on, and I started getting into, which I didn't realize at the time, an addiction to alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
Now, drugs, I wasn't really into drugs that much. I like to smoke weed and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I took LSD a lot. But
Okay.
as far as Paul McCartney once said, when the drugs started getting dangerous, they weren't fun anymore.
Yeah.
I didn't get involved in that stuff. I tried it, but
Okay.
it wasn't mine. And one day I just completely quit.
Okay.
But alcohol, for some reason, the devil says, "You're not done yet.
Mhm.
You're coming with me."
Mhm.
And I followed him.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't listen to my heart. I listened to this committee
Mhm.
going up here. And so,
Now, was that were you drinking alone or drinking?
no, I was drinking mostly social,
Mhm.
but I didn't realize the addiction would come later.
Mhm.
There's a term in Alcoholics Anonymous they use. It's called, once you cross that line,
Mhm.
for some people, there's no coming back. But we had to figure out how we crossed that line. You cross this line and you're lost, totally lost. So, anyways, I was living in Southern California. I got fired from one job, moved over to another job that did the same thing, and got
Only
fired from, which was making, back then where I grew up in Southern California, all down the highway or whatever was orange orchards, and they started cutting them down
okay.
and building houses, and we call them sticks. Look at all the sticks going up on our hillside.
Okay.
So I worked for companies that customized and light fixtures and made them for these homes and sold them to these homes.
Okay.
And anyways, so I was down where I had no job, no money, and also I didn't have a place to live. But I
Okay.
had a Volkswagen bus that had a
Well, there you
bed in
go.
it.
How old
So
were you about this time?
I was in my early 20s.
Okay. So this is like 5 years
Yeah, I lived that
out.
fame for 5, 6 years,
Okay.
and then God took that away. But I didn't know that
Mhm.
at the time.
Mhm.
So I kept continuing with following the committee.
Mhm.
So I did that, and then I had a friend of mine whose family and stuff owned a big old ranch, 4,000-acre ranch in Tipton, California, in San Joaquin Valley. He goes, "Hey, I could use some help up here." I go, "Well, I'm not a farmer." Well, you'll learn.
Mhm.
So I went up there, and his family talked to me, and they hired me.
Mhm.
So I lived on this 4,000-acre ranch, was completely flat,
Okay.
and it was partial row crops and cattle, and I hated it. But I would go up to Three Rivers, California, which wasn't too far from there, um, and hang out there on my days off.
Was it like more like a town or?
The Three Rivers, California, was in the forest.
Okay.
It was on the river. Three Rivers, California, was in the forest.
Okay.
It was on the river, and the big General Grant redwoods were just up
Okay.
the road from there, and I loved it up there.
Yeah.
Well, then I wound up getting fired from this place.
From the ranch.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I'm going, what am I going to do now? Still had my Volkswagen bus though,
Mhm.
so it wasn't without a roof over my head.
Right.
And my friend in Oregon says, "Hey, he was a big shot for the Deschutes Road Company up there in Bend, Oregon." He says, "I can get you a job here. I'll put you to work." He goes, "Matter of fact, I have a house in what's that? In Oregon, Primeville, Oregon, a condominium that I bought over there, but I'll get rid of those tenants and you can live there."
Okay.
Well, I thought about it, and then my mom lived in Placerville at the time.
Okay.
So she says, "Well, come by and visit us." So I came by.
Mhm.
She lived up the road. And so I wound up meeting my future ex wife.
In Placerville.
Yes.
Mhm.
And getting married, moving to Coloma for a couple of years,
So you
then up
never
to
made
Paul.
it to Oregon?
Then, no, I never made it to
Okay.
Oregon. And I thought, oh, this is, to my mind, I'm going, this is God shot.
Mhm.
I'm here. I'll stay here. My mom's here. Family's here. I'm going to get a wife. I'm going to raise a family.
Mhm.
And I eliminated music, excuse me, completely out of my life. I was done.
Did you so you said in your mind it was kind of like a God shot.
Yeah.
Was there a little bit of a turning back? A little.
No, there was nothing. I
Okay.
just, here,
Okay.
the
Okay.
devil, the devil could say, yeah, yeah, God wants
Mhm.
that,
Okay. Gotcha.
He, yeah, God wants you to do this, and you think that way,
Okay.
especially when you're impaired. And I think when I lived in Coloma, I think that's when my alcoholism kind of started growing, but I wasn't aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember first moving up here, getting a job in this county was very hard at the time, especially permanent jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So we wound up going to a place. She found a place because Coloma wasn't.
There's hardly anyone that lives in Coloma now. It's like under
I
a
wish I lived there. I wish I
oh
would have bought
yeah.
property there because I love Coloma.
Yeah,
Back
no.
then, it was just I didn't care.
Okay.
You know,
Was were there more people there at that
no,
time? No. I mean
no.
we're talking about so we're talking about the site, the town where gold was discovered
Right, and
and
and I moved back in this county in 1983.
in 83.
Right, and
And
I've been
so
here since.
that town, though historically preserved, there's only it's under 100 people, right? Is it?
At the time, yes, and I remember it snowing there one time when I lived there,
Oh yeah.
and I remember one time on New Year's Day it was 80 degrees there.
Wow.
But I remember just meeting the people because we rented a little cabin over there,
Okay.
which was called the Coloma Resort,
Okay.
and they had travel trailers or RVs, whatever you call them. People were living there,
Okay.
and I just started partying with those people. We do
Mm.
stupid things. We go down the river, or we'd lock somebody up in that little jail that's out
I
there.
remember that jail.
Back
Yeah.
then, it wasn't locked. You could put a stick through there and put somebody in there, put a stick in there and leave them. Excuse me. We did crazy things like that.
Yeah.
But at the time, I think I was getting unemployment and stuff, and the wife was working, and let's see, and then I got a job for this. It was another fabrication shop that was over here on Park West, but that didn't last too long because I worked there 4 days. But they used to guys would come in that had traveling jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this these one crew came in and goes, "Hey, another guy's coming and he needs a helper. Helper doing what?" And he
Mm-hmm.
says, "Working on core drill rigs." Core drill rigs, yeah. And he says, "Yeah, we drill samples for a gold company
Oh.
for gold minerals."
In
So
the
they hired me, and I've worked that really hard.
in
It
the
was about,
rock? They
yeah, we
drilled in
drill
the
through
rock?
core and
Okay.
get core samples,
Okay.
and that determines the gold and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And when I worked in, it was a little bit of traveling, but we were working down here off of Old French Creek Road,
Mm-hmm.
off of Doc Shiver's property that he let the gold company come in and drill
Okay.
off his property. And there was probably about 4 or 5 rigs there. We started working in the day, 12-hour shifts, and then we went every other week. We switched to nights, which was really messed up your sleeping.
I bet.
But anyways, we were drilling there, and one time we very rarely drilled at 70 degree or 90. We're always at 45-degree angles.
Okay.
And most of your geologists won't tell you anything, but these couple of geologists came up there and told us what. Hey, check this out. This is what I want. I want another 4,000 feet of this, or cut it off. We're gonna move you.
Okay.
And then I asked him, I said, how come we're always drilling at 45
Mm-hmm.
degree angles? And he kind of laughed. He goes, well, see that property over there? He goes, yeah, that's their property, but we own the mineral rights.
Mm.
And I said, really? He says, yeah, if we find gold over there, we're going underneath their house
Oh, so that was
and
the
mine it.
reason.
Yeah. So, anyways, they invited us up to the Goldfields Company, invited us up to a party up in Donner Summit.
Okay.
And I guess you call them leathernecks or whatever, that drillers or whatever they call them.
Oh.
You don't tell drillers when they've been drinking, you're fired or the job ends. Well, that happened, and all kinds of weird things happened. So I came back,
Without a job.
and yeah, so that job
Okay.
was done. Not by me, it was done by the company saying, hey, the job's done,
Okay.
unless you want to go to this state. And I didn't want to do that.
Okay.
So I wound up being a temporary worker at EID, and
Mm-hmm.
wound up being a seasonal worker And then politics stepped in with that job when there was an opening for a job there. I applied for it and I didn't get it because they had favoritism back in those days and they hired somebody else. So I was pretty depressed. And then my brother-in-law at the time worked for Eldorado Disposal.
Mm-hmm.
He says, "We're getting recycle trucks. You need to go in there and fill out an application." I don't want to be a garbage man. Well, I wound up doing that, and I wound up being a garbage man for 24 years.
Driving the trucks.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when it was owned by the family. And then they sold in 19, and I was in my alcoholism still pretty heavy.
Okay.
And they sold in 1998. And so corporate people bought them, which was completely different. They said they weren't going to change everything, but they changed everything. It was a horrible thing to experience. Horrible. So they call alcoholism a progressive disease.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in 1994, I'm going to back up. 1994, my wife left me because of my alcoholism. I didn't realize it until I came home one night and nobody was home.
Okay.
And I not noticed stuff was missing. So, anyways, I went into Alcoholics Anonymous on that. Not
Were you still living in Coloma?
No, I was living in Pollock Pines. We purchased a home up there in
Okay.
Sly Park Hills,
Okay.
and at the time, and so she left me with the kids, my daughter and stepsons, and moved up to her parents. That he worked for PG&E, so he was up at Camp One on the old canal when PG&E owned it, and EID eventually bought that. So out of trying to get her back, the family back, I decided to go to AA. So
Mm-hmm.
I went to AA, and I heard a lot of good stuff. And I was going, I don't need to be here, kind of thing. But I wound up, I think I got sober for like 60 days, and I noticed a change.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't drinking,
right,
but I wasn't seeking. But I remember a lot of things in it that mentions God.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I believed in that and stuff, but I just didn't know how to approach that anymore. Right. I was a lost soul. That's what I was. I was burned out. I crossed that line that they talk about. Well, for some reason, I just went back and started drinking, and I just started drinking heavier and heavier.
You said, if I understood you right, you said you were sober for 60 days, but you weren't seeking, meaning seeking God.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
I was sober because I wanted that family back. And a lot of people do that.
Right.
I was seeking self-will again.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, this went on and I left. And I remember walking with my daughter and a neighbor, and she was an alcoholic and still is to this day, and I pray for her all the time. Mm-hmm. I'm surprised she's still alive. Mm-hmm. But I was walking with her, and the kids got out of school. She went and picked them up, and we were at the fair. Mm-hmm. So while she went to the school to pick them up, I decided to have a drink. Mm-hmm. And it was on again. Okay. And it went on, and from that time, I remember my daughter was young, and I remember her coming to visit me, and all I did was pass out. Mm. And she was the adult when she came to visit. So she would get the fires going in the fireplace at 8 years old.
So when your ex-wife had left, she left the kids with you, but then they ended up.
Well, she didn't leave the kids with me. I had my visitation rights. My daughter would come over on weekends. Okay. And stuff like that. Then she cut that off. That'll be part of my story here too. Okay. So I'm gonna kind of move a little faster. So that went on, and then wound up selling the place. Mm-hmm. And I'm going, what am I gonna do now? And I should have kept the place, but my neighbor behind me was never there. Him and his wife wanted to get a cabin in Tahoe. They lived in the Bay Area, but they would come up once in a while, and I got to know them, mm-hmm. Because he'd ask me to cut trees in his yard once in a while. And so I decided to call him one time. I said, "Hey, Phil, you and your wife are never here. How about maybe paying your mortgage
Mm-hmm.
on your place and I can live there?"
Mm-hmm.
So they wound up doing that. And back in the 80s, early 90s, your mortgage payments were like $500.
Mm-hmm.
And this was another, and I know God was working in my life because He provided stuff
Mm-hmm.
to make sure I was comfortable and maybe wake up,
Right.
but I didn't.
Right.
So I continued with my alcoholism in there. And every holiday or birthday, and my mother was still alive, I would always say I had the flu. I couldn't make the functions. Well, on my last night of drinking was December 24th, 2001.
Okay.
And the insane thing what the devil did to my head was that I lived by myself and I would hide that poison all over the place. Alcohol. Why? That's
Within your
the
house.
insanity. I didn't want to run out. But then again, you forget where you put them.
Mm-hmm.
So that Christmas morning, I woke up. I couldn't find anything. And I was going, it's a dark, demented state. I don't recommend for anyone to ever go there or be there. And if you're there now, I pray for your soul to get out of it. It's not a good place to be. So, anyways, I couldn't find anything, but I remember Sly Park's store. They were open on Christmas Eve, I thought. So I drove up there. They were closed. Oh, I know Safeway's open, but I don't feel like driving up that way. Holiday Market, they said they were closed. So I drove home. This is when God entered in. I didn't know it at the time. So I drove home and I parked my truck on the driveway, but I forgot I left it in neutral and it rolled down. But it hit a tree. It stopped it. So I went in the house. Next thing I know, my daughter calls before I went to looking for booze, said, "Hey, we're going to grandma's for Christmas. Come pick me up." I said, "Oh, I'm not feeling good." So, anyways, as I got back home, I don't know how much time went through. I get a call. This is when we still had main lines and all that. And it was my daughter. And she just bluntly said, "Dad, I'm coming to get you. We're taking you to the hospital." And I didn't, I said, "What?" And she said, "We're coming to get you. We're taking you to the hospital." And she hung up. I was mad at first. I set the phone down. And all of a sudden, this calm came over. I sat down in my chair. I looked up and said, "I'm done. I am done, God. If you need to take me now, take me." Well, here's where the sense of humor comes. I ain't done with you yet. I didn't know that at the time. So they get up, they get there, and they had to literally carry me out, because that's how weak I was from the disease. And my daughter was bawling, my mom was bawling, and my daughter said she freaked out because when they picked me up, my pants weren't fitting me. But friends of mine said when they saw me that my liver was sticking out like this. I didn't see that. So they got me to Marshall Hospital and they wheeled me in on a wheelchair, immediately put me on a gurney. And my mom and daughter were signing the papers, whatever. And when they got me in the gurney, they were wheeling me past my mom and my daughter. And this is way before they had the new emergency room. They had the old emergency room there. And it looked different. It looked huge. I mean, it looked huge to me. And so when I was going by, I had a moment of clarity. I looked at my daughter and my mother, and they were just bawling their eyes out. I looked up at God again and asked Him, "If you need to take me now." And then that moment of clarity came over, but I'm not going to leave my daughter without a father.
How old was she at that
And
time?
boom, that, what do you call it, obsession, the addiction was gone. He removed that immediately because I came to Him at the time. He made me feel, God makes us feel pains so we get closer to Him. He's not going to put pains on us, but He's going to make us feel them. And when I went in and they wheeled me in and they set me in this room, and it's Christmas morning. Remember this? I got in there. It was probably still in the morning, and I was in this room, and you could see all the other emergencies back then. They had the curtains like this and this and that. And I remember people walking around, and all of a sudden I heard this noise behind me. I didn't realize it was a nurse behind me hooking up IVs to me. And here I am, gone all blurry eyed, going, "Hey, you better check my blood sugar too." And she did, and I was fine. But I was going, "What are you doing?" She goes, "You're dehydrated severely. We got to get you going." Then they ran me through all these X-rays, stuff, and then wheeled me back in that same spot. And so I was sitting there, and I was watching. God put in front of me this family was across the way, and I can hear them weeping, but they looked like they were way over there, and they weren't. And I can hear them weeping, and but the curtain was drawn, and then the curtain opened up, and the family started coming out, and here comes the priest. Give that person their last rites. Here's God saying, that could have been you, but I have other plans for you. You're going to suffer a little more, but I have other plans for you. I didn't know at the time that he would say suffer, but I realized what it was about. Mm-hmm. So it was Christmas. Of course, my doctor couldn't be there. He was with his family, of course. So by the time the house doctor got to me, it was like 11 o'clock at night. They finally had a bed for me. Mm. So he gets me, he says this and that, and says, your doctor will be in tomorrow, but yeah, we're going to get you up in bed, and I'm going to give you a sedation so you can sleep tonight. So I'm getting it. They will get me up in the bed, and you know how they have those arm lift things there? Yeah. I couldn't even pull myself up on that. So weak. And the nurse got a little aggravated with me. And she said, come on, you can lift yourself up. I said, I can't. And they ran me through all these X-rays, stuff, and then wheeled me back in that same spot. And so I was sitting there, and I was watching. God put in front of me this family was across the way, and I can hear them weeping, but they looked like they were way over there, and they weren't. And I can hear them weeping, but the curtain was drawn, and then the curtain opened up, and the family started coming out, and here comes the priest. Give that person their last rites. Here's God saying, that could have been you, but I have other plans for you. You're going to suffer a little more, but I have other plans for you. I didn't know at the time that he would say suffer, but I realized what it was about. Mm-hmm. So it was Christmas. Of course, my doctor couldn't be there. He was with his family, of course. Mm-hmm. So by the time the house doctor got to me, it was like 11 o'clock at night. They finally had a bed for me. Mm-hmm. So he gets me, he says this and that, and says, your doctor will be in tomorrow, but yeah, we're going to get you up in bed, and I'm going to give you a sedation so you can sleep tonight. So I'm getting it. They will get me up in the bed, and you know how they have those arm lift things there? Yeah. I couldn't even pull myself up on that. So weak. And the nurse got a little aggravated with me, and she said, "Come on, you can lift yourself up." I said, "I can't." So, anyways, that night goes by. They sedate me, and I slept. Mm-hmm. The next morning, my doctor comes in, our family doctor, and he had the papers from all the X-rays and whatever other blood tests they did to me, and he just dropped that folder on that little cart thing, you know, that tray, mm-hmm. and he walks over to the window, looks out the window for a little bit. I didn't know that, but he was praying. I didn't know that. So he comes walking back over and he goes, doesn't look good, son. I go, what do you mean? He goes, you got severe cirrhosis of the liver. And no telling what else is going on in there right now until we do more testing. No, we'll sit, and of course, here's me. Well, how much longer do I have? He goes, oh, I'm not God. I can't tell you that. Then he walks around, looks out the window again, but he comes over and points his finger at me. But maybe if you got God in your life, you might survive. And that's all I needed to hear. Because then we stepped back to 1994 when I first went in AA and what it said. Seek God. If you don't have a God, seek one now. And he will help you. And I knew exactly that's what I needed to do. But this was part of the process to get me back on that.
Mhm.
So they kept me in the hospital, ran all these tests, this and that. They kept me there for a week. And he was going to let me out on New Year's Eve, but I was in no condition. And also, I lost a lot of my nervous system through all that. I was
Okay.
pretty well shot. So they got me to where I had no equilibrium. My balance was way off. So they got me. He was going to release me. They got me down where they needed me to be. He's going to release me on New Year's Day. But he says this to me. Here's another gotcha. But he says, that's when people like to drink. I'm not going to let you out. And I was in no condition, and that was already removed, but I
Right.
didn't really realize it.
Right.
So he says, I'm going to give you oxygen, I'm going to give you some blood, and I'm going to release you in the morning. So he did that, and I was released in the morning, and my mom came and got me, took me into her home, and raised me back to health. She had to teach me how to walk again. And eventually I got into I don't remember. I think I was at her place for 6, maybe 8 weeks.
Okay.
And she brought me back to health, fed me good, this and that. And I had another friend that worked at El Dorado Supposedly that would take me to my doctor's appointments and stuff like that. And at this time, when this was all going on, I was going through a lawsuit with my previous employer, El Dorado Disposal,
Mhm.
not the family one on it when they sold the corporate.
Right.
So I had to cancel with my lawyers. So their private investigators would come over to my mom and talk to me. But I remember when I was able to go to my lawyer, I walked in his office. He was in shock because he says, "You look like,
Yeah.
blank."
Yeah.
And I might look that way,
Yeah.
but I don't feel that way
Yeah.
anymore. I
Yeah.
feel pretty,
Better.
my life is coming back together.
Yeah.
So, anyways, as soon as I was able to start making the AA meetings, that's what I did. That's where God put me.
Mhm.
So I started getting in AA. I started getting more clarity. I started feeling even better. And I decided, well, it's time to go home. But I think I went home a little early.
Mhm.
But that friend that would help me out, he came in, made sure I had enough firewood inside and this and that. I got a fire going for me. And I said, thank you. And I felt great.
Mhm.
Well, come around dinner time, I was getting hungry. So I went in there to cut me up some vegetables. I couldn't do it.
Mm.
I said, maybe I left my mom's a little early, but I figured it out. I had to figure these things out.
Right.
And God was with me at the time. And then by the time I got more clarity, I think I was probably 6 months sober. And I remember there was a service position open at the home group I was going to, AA,
Mhm.
and I didn't take it.
Mm.
So I was driving home. My sponsor calls me and goes,
Mhm.
"What are you doing?" I said, "I just left an AA meeting," and he goes, "Well, did you look at that service position that's open over there?" I said,
Mhm.
"Oh, I want it." He goes, "You turn around, go back, and you take it."
Mhm.
So I did. That's when I knew I have to give back.
Mhm.
So I took that server position at 6 months sober, like they say you're supposed to.
Mhm.
And I kept that position, but I went to other night days or nights. I kept that position for over 6 years.
Oh wow. So a service position in AA.
It's opening the doors, making sure you're the
Mhm.
secretary, get the meeting
Okay.
going, make sure that everything is not crazy. You
Mhm.
stick to AA,
Mhm.
nothing outside, nothing.
Mhm.
And you get a share person to give their testimony, or you read out of, they call it the big books, Alcoholics Anonymous, and
Mhm.
you talk about that.
Mhm.
And a lot of people don't realize Alcoholics Anonymous, when it first started, they used the Bible,
Right.
and the 12 steps come from the Bible.
Right.
It's called the spiritual journey. So, anyways, I did that, and I also got into service, and this is how they did it in AA. This is another God shot. There used to be a over here on 49, I can't, Gates Recovery
Okay.
House. A friend of mine calls me up. Oh, Uncle Fuzz is his name. He won't mind if I say his name. He's pretty well known around here.
Mhm.
Um, Calls me up. He goes, once a month, every Wednesday, you're gonna do Gates Recovery. Click.
You got voluntold.
I went and did Gates Recovery. I did that for 3 or 4 years
Mhm.
until they shut down, and broke my heart when they shut down
Mm.
because we need more of those.
Mhm.
And
Was it a
then,
live-in place?
well, it was recovery,
Recovery. Yeah.
and for people in really bad shape like myself.
Mhm.
And it's another story which I don't want to get into that
Sure.
why it closed down. So I continued in my sobriety. My sponsor was a God loving man. Matter of fact, he went to Calvary Chapel over here. His wife was Al Anon,
Mhm.
wonderful lady. And this man took me through the 12 steps, and all he says is, I know you hear this at meetings, you got to do them fast. He goes, no, we do it on God's time. God's time could be here, it could be here, and here.
Mhm.
God has really no time.
Mhm.
It's all about Him. And so I did that. And I continued through my sobriety, and I got sober. So my sobriety date is December 25th, 2001.
Mhm.
I haven't had a drink or anything else since
Mhm.
then.
Praise God.
Uh, and my life was getting better.
Mhm.
Um, through the stage of recovery, I had a little bit of money. And so, I was kind of living on my own. And all of a sudden, I was at an AA meeting with a guy that I met in Coloma
Oh wow.
that I drank with.
Yeah.
He was sober for 30 some years.
Okay.
And he goes, Hey, are you working?
Mhm.
I said, No. Are you looking for a job? And I kind of said, Not really. He goes, Well, we're looking for somebody, but you might not like it. I go, What is it?
Mhm.
He goes, Oh, one thing is we start at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. So that's right up my alley. I was a garbage man.
Mhm.
He says, Well, why don't you come and check it out?
Mhm.
And it was a subcontractor for Rayleigh's
Okay.
and all their stores.
Mhm.
So I went with him one night and saw what they did. I said, This is all you do? He goes, Yeah. I said, I'll take the job.
Mhm.
So I had to meet the owner of the company. And I go, You want me to fill out an application? He goes, No, I knew you worked with them good old boys over there, Alvarado Disposal. You're hired.
Mhm.
And I worked for them till he lost the contract or gave it up
Mhm.
for 12 years. But
Mhm.
then I kept continuously getting involved. In the meantime, when I was working for this gentleman right up the road here, 15 years ago on Memorial Weekend, my daughter was in a serious head injury right up the road.
Like a car
No,
crash?
she
No.
she. What happened was my daughter was very athletic. She played softball. And she was very good at it. I coached her since she was like 8 years old,
Mhm.
and she played rec. Well, for Placerville, she played for Oak Ridge, and she played for El Dorado High School softball team.
Mhm.
And when she got out of high school and stuff, that was all over and done. So she joined, the rec,
Parks and Rec. Yeah.
guys that want to be professionals. So she played that. She loves it.
Mhm.
And well, she was up at my stepson lived up here off of Mount Shasta Court or something like that. And she went up there. I just got home from an AA function or something.
Mhm.
And she was up there, is what I heard the story was that she just got back and she had on the like nylon shorts and
Yes.
stuff. And this is what my
Stepson.
stepson and his friends are doing. Back in those days, they get the big tires, put something inside the bottom of it, and set lawn chairs in it. And they wore the pads and the helmets and get towed with the ski rope behind the truck. So my daughter thought that was hilarious. So she got on the back of the truck to want
Mhm.
to film them. Well,
Oh.
right at the top of the hill, they were coming around, turning around, and she started sliding off of that uh, the bench or the tool chest,
Mm.
sliding off, and her friend tried to grab her, but it didn't
Mm.
happen. Well,
Mm.
she fell on the back of her head.
Mm.
Thank God it happened in front of her coach from high school over here, her coach, softball coach,
Mhm.
who also at the time was a lieutenant for the sheriff's department.
Okay.
He knew exactly what to do.
Good.
So I'm sitting there, I get a phone call from my stepson's wife, which I didn't care for.
Mhm.
She goes, Are you sitting down? I go, Why should I?
Mhm.
She goes, I think you need to sit down. I said, they just life flighted your daughter to Roseville Trauma Center. You need to get her over there. I went, oh, what? So they hung up. And for some reason, I took off my shoes. I don't know why.
Hmm.
Then I went, I can't be doing that. So I put them back on. I jumped in my truck and I started driving. A friend of mine that I met in AA, who's been sober now, he was just new when he first got in. Calls me. He goes, "Where are you, Donnie?" He was just calling to see what I was doing.
Okay.
I said, "I'm on my way. Julia just got in a very severe accident. I'm heading to the Roseville Trauma Center. I have no idea where it's at." He goes, "You pull over this in Rayleigh's parking lot. I'll meet you there." So I pulled in there. He was there. He took me.
Drove you down.
So, anyways, I get there and you're greeted by a social worker, and it's not pleasant.
Yeah.
So I'm going through this, and they take you into this room, then they take you into this room, and they're just warming you up for the worst. And then they sit you in this room with everybody that was involved in this thing, whatever happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of angry because I asked these kids, and I shouldn't have been, what happened?
Mm-hmm.
Whose fault was it? Then it dawned on me, it's my daughter's fault.
Mm-hmm.
She put this on herself.
Mm-hmm.
So I apologized to the group. And I finally got up into the very last family room before you go through the doors in the trauma center. They wanted to prepare me more, and then they allowed me to come in. All I saw was this male nurse running around frantically going, "Where's the mother?" I go, "We're divorced." "Where is she?" I go, "She lives back east." "Well, she needs to get here now." So I'm going, "Oh my God, what's going on?" So my daughter was laying there, her face all puffed up. She had all kinds of stuff, and you can see like 5 or 6 machines. So I couldn't take it. I went out and I was talking to one of the nurses there. I said, "Hey, everything's gonna be all right. We're doing the best we can." And the good thing is she was life flighted
Mm-hmm.
from right up here too, and they had it all set up for her. Well, I met the neurosurgeon that was in charge that night. He says, "We're going to wheel her down, take some x-rays of her brain, and I'll call you in my office when that's all done." So he went in there and they x-rayed, and then he called me in his office and says, "Well, we don't have to do surgery. The swelling's bad, but we don't have to do surgery. But we're going to put a monitor on her head and check it all out."
Mm-hmm.
He says, "You can go in and see her now if you want." And the nurse explained to me what all those readings were.
Mm-hmm.
And the most important one was in white. I remember that was her brain swelling and was at a place where it needs to stay
Okay.
or to get better.
Right.
It can't go below or whatever.
Right.
So, anyways, that went by, and of course, I didn't leave the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next morning, the head surgeon who helped start that trauma center in Roseville, his name was Dr. Bosco.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that name was that's kind of a weird name. Came in and he had a meeting with the family. And he says, "Don't ask me any questions till I explain to you the situation." And I follow that. Of course, my family on the other side were always interrupted. So he explained to me that if her recovery rate was from 1 to 10, he said she's got a chance of 2 right now. And he says, "You people couldn't hear that interrupted me. I'm done with this meeting." He came walking right straight to me
Mm-hmm.
and said, "But there's hope." He says, "One thing I noticed is that the reason we didn't have to do surgery because she had multiple fractures on the back of her head that allowed for the swelling. We just have to keep an eye
Mm-hmm.
on all this." So they don't call it a coma; they call it sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So they put her to sleep because they don't want you to move. They
Mm-hmm.
do not want you to move
Right.
at
So you
all
can
because it's a
heal.
brain
Yeah.
injury. So I was sitting in there and I started picking up these books and reading them about brain injuries.
Mm-hmm.
And they've come a long ways back then.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have this dear friend of mine I met in AA. His son went to school with my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks before that, he was on a head-on collision on Sly Park Road. And he was at UC Davis in very serious conditioning. His dad calls me up and says, "Hey, I hear Julia's in pretty bad shape." And he's taking his time to give his, you know, to help me get through this trauma.
When his own son is,
Yeah, and
yeah.
so, and he was a God man. Through Alcoholics Anonymous brought him to God, and he was a very grateful, gratitude person. And he goes, "My whole family's praying for you right now." He goes, and you need to pray. And I started praying again and stuff, and just asking God for mercy on my daughter and this and that. So after he did that, I called him my spiritual advisor at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I went down to the chapel downstairs and put her on the prayer list. Then I walked back out on the balcony and started praying to God and just, just have mercy on my daughter. But if you're going to take her, at least I'm sober and I'm back with you, Lord. And then I just saw out of the corner of my eye, I started playing music again. And here comes my guitar player with his wife and kids. They found me on this balcony out in the middle of nowhere and started talking to me and this and that. So the family got there and this and that, and all this is going on. I'm staying in the hospital. I never left. And I'm getting my daughter's friends are coming in every day, checking on me, checking on her. Only thing we ask that you give us an update anytime you get an update. That's all we ask. And so, my daughter was in the coma, sleep for 9 days. They kept continue to keep me up in the where I was comfortable. And I remember on that ninth day, they were wheeling. They said that they were going to wheel her in and X-ray her head on the ninth day. I believe it was ninth or 10th day. And I saw her. I was sitting in that family lobby thing, and I saw her being wheeled in down the hallway. Next thing I know, I see her being wheeled back. Then I see this neurosurgeon come in. He had a smile like from ear to ear. He sat down right next to me. He says, "I have no doubt in my mind that your daughter's going to have a full recovery." Her swelling went down. The only thing we got to take her, we got to send her to UCI because she has a little hemorrhage, and I think it was the right side or left side. But the night before that, I forgot. The night before that, I would always stay there late at night, and every night before I would leave to go back to my room, I'd lay hands on my daughter and pray. She had all this stuff on her, and I would lay there and pray. And all of a sudden, I felt this.
Yeah. Poking.
And I turned around and looked, and there was nobody there. Because I thought it was a nurse saying, "Hey, you can go home now. You need to get, you need to take care of yourself." And this bed started doing it. I thought it was the machines. So I went back to the room and I gave my friends the update. I said, "The weirdest thing happened." They go, "What's that?" I said, "I was sitting there praying like I always do with my hands on Julia. And I felt like somebody's tapping me, like, hey." They go, "What time was this at?" And I gave them a time. I don't remember. She goes, "Oh my God, we were down on our knees praying." The next day is when she was okay. So they said, "We're going to bring her out of her sleep later on this afternoon, and we want the mom and you to be there." Well, they started to, and she started pulling this stuff out. So they brought her back down because she was pulling stuff out. They said, "We're going to do it slower, but we're going to wait till tomorrow." So they did that. And after that was all done, they wheeled her in this other room. Dr. Bosco comes in. Because he's the head. He starts asking my daughter questions. And he's looking at me the whole time he's doing this. Right? So she answers some of the questions. She's awake, like somebody waking up from a sleep. She started asking the nurses, remove her neck brace. She had all this stuff on her. And I would lay there and pray. And all of a sudden I felt this.
Yeah. Poking.
And I turned around and looked, and there was nobody there. Because I thought it was a nurse saying, "Hey, you can go home now. You need to get, you need to take care of yourself." And this bed started doing it. I thought it was the machines. So I went back to the room and I gave my friends the update. I
Mhm.
said, "The weirdest thing happened." They go, "What's that?" I said, "I was sitting there praying like I always do with my hands on Julia, and I felt like somebody's tapping me, like,
Mhm.
hey."
Mhm.
They go, "What time was this at?" And I gave him a time. I don't remember. She goes, "Oh my God, we were down on our knees praying." The next day is when she was okay.
Right.
So they said, "We're going to bring her out of her sleep later on this afternoon, and we want the mom and you to be there."
Mhm.
Well, they started to, and she started pulling this stuff out. So they brought her
Right.
back down because she was
Right.
pulling
Yeah.
stuff out. They said, "We're going to do it slower, but we're going to wait till tomorrow."
Okay.
So they did that. And after that was all done, they wheeled her in this other room. Dr. Bosco comes in. Because he's the head. He starts asking my daughter questions, and he's looking at me the whole time he's doing this,
Mhm.
right? So she answers some of the questions. She's awake, like somebody waking up from a sleep.
Right.
She started asking the nurses to remove her neck brace. Then he'd ask her some more questions. And she didn't answer them correctly, but she did answer.
Mhm.
Then he asked his nurses to remove this. Before you
Mhm.
know it, everything was removed.
Mhm.
Then he says, "Anybody in here knows now this is the most we can do for her because the insurance companies," he says, "I don't particularly care for Kaiser because they're all about money."
Mhm.
Excuse me. "We have to transfer her over there.
Mhm.
But anybody in this room
Mhm.
needs to know to help her with her recovery. Are you going to be there for her 24/7?"
Mhm.
And I raised my hand.
Mhm.
Nobody else did.
Mhm.
And he came walking over to me to take my hand. And you know what was around his neck where he had his ID? Jesus.
Mhm.
Jesus was there the whole time. He spared my daughter just like he spared me.
Mhm.
So he thanked me and loved me. And I said, "I thank you, Dr. Bosco. God put you in my life." And he goes, "Well, he put your daughter in my life too. You do what you can for the best of her." My friends that I talked about took me out and take care of her
Mhm.
because I had to go back to work.
Mhm.
And they promised my daughter if she came out of there, we were going to take her to Hawaii when she was in the coma.
Mhm.
So they took her into her place,
Mhm.
taught her to count. I mean, they worked with her
Yeah.
tremendously, and they did keep their promise. They took her to Hawaii, and in the meantime, all this stuff's going on. And when she came out of that, when that doctor told me she was going to have full recovery, I called my friend Jay, whose son, because I wanted to check on him. He says, "Well, they have to reconstruct his leg, but he's doing all right." And I told him about Julie. He goes, "Okay, this is what I want you to do.
Mhm.
Whatever you want me to do, I'll do. Because I want you to go in those family rooms and ask if you can pray for their loved
Yeah.
ones." And I did.
Yeah.
I said, "Hey, do you care if I pray for your family?"
Yeah.
No. And I said, "Let's stand up and hold hands." And I
Yeah.
prayed and I prayed. Then the next thing, when she was all in Kaiser, she was there for 2 weeks because the hemorrhage.
Mhm.
And I remember their neurosurgeon over there said, "Okay, we're going to release her and send her down to Vallejo or the rehab so she can get her
Mhm.
mobilities and all this." Well, she had mobilities. God blessed her with that. I could see that. And she knew who I was. She knew who everybody was. And that
Yeah.
was a plus.
Yeah.
And then they said we're going to send her down there for like 2 or 3 months. So when that all happened, she got on the bus. Bless her heart, not the bus, but the ambulance to ship her down
Mhm.
to um, to
Vallejo.
Vallejo. And they told me, they warned me about this. The nurses and doctors said when she comes out of this, she's going to talk like a drunken sailor, and she did.
Mhm.
I mean, you talk, and I was shocked,
Mhm.
but they prepared me for it because she every other word came out of her mouth wasn't a pleasant word,
Right.
you know.
Right.
But she was alive,
Yeah.
and I remember when she got in that ambulance, and I said, "I'll be down there later. I have to take care of some paperwork." She flipped me off. That's just what she
Right.
was. She didn't want to be in that. She didn't understand what was
Right.
going on. So I didn't make it down to her first rehab stuff down there. First, because they did it twice a day. I got down there, and my dear friends again already had hotel reservations down there by the hospital.
Wow. Yeah.
But this time his wife wanted to go, and she had a room next to me. She wanted to be there.
Yeah.
And because they couldn't have children, they adopted my daughter a long time ago. I said, "This is your daughter too." And I said, "Mom." And so we get down there, and we get to go to her physical therapist.
Mm-hmm.
So she's in a wheelchair,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm wheeling her down. And I see all these, God puts things in my face again. There was a teenage girl playing soccer that was paralyzed from the neck down from, injury.
Mm-hmm.
There was an older man in there that was willing to do whatever it took to be able to walk again.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw other things that didn't look pleasant.
Right.
So as my daughter's doing this physical therapy, the physical therapist whispers in my ear, and I'm hard of hearing.
Mm-hmm.
She goes, "I don't think she's going to be here very long." Red flag goes up. What are they sending her now?
Mm-hmm.
I said, "What do you mean by that?"
Mm-hmm.
She goes, "She's doing so well.
Mm-hmm.
We're probably going to release her and do
Mm-hmm.
outpatient."
Mm-hmm.
God again,
Yeah.
right there. Well, they kept her for a couple more days.
Mm-hmm.
She wound up being there 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember we were sitting in her room, and she was getting the stitches out of where they had the monitor and stuff, and cussing words. There were staples, and the sailor stuff came out again.
Mm-hmm.
But she goes, "Hey, I got to tell you guys something." And goes, "What that?" When they first brought me here, they put me in the zipper thing bed, so you can't get out because it's brain injury. They don't want you to fall because they can kill you.
Mm-hmm.
He says, "I kept ringing the buzzer, Dad. I had to go to the bathroom so bad."
Mm-hmm.
She figured out how to open that zipper thing, got out, and went and used the bathroom. And she says, "Well, I got scolded after that." And I told him, I said, "I kept ringing that." I said, "I think you're going to have a good recovery."
Right.
So anyway, she got back home, and she was doing the rehab over there at my friend's. And I started going, "God, thank you so much." Just praising him, praising him. God, why do you have so much mercy? I'm not, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. I'm far from being worthy, but you bless me all the time. Why?
Mm-hmm.
And I have a right to question him. Of course, he didn't give me an answer. So I'm sitting there going, you know what? I got to figure out how I'm going to give this back. So it dawned on me. I play music. And God brought it to my attention. You play music, fool. So,
He's funny.
that's a sense of humor.
Yes.
I love God's sense of humor.
Yes.
Some people don't, but anyways, I went on Craigslist, and I was just on it. I wasn't really looking at anything in particular. So I saw worship team Placerville looking for a drummer.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, "What the heck?" I get a call. "Yes, we are looking for a drummer."
Mm-hmm.
"Oh yeah? Where are you at?"
Mm-hmm.
"We're at Solid Rock Faith Center." "Where's that?" Mm-hmm. So they told me. So after a couple of days, they go, "Hey, we want you to come in Saturday. We want to audition you." Mm-hmm. I said, "Okay, fine." He says, "You might want to bring your drum stool and, of course, bring your sticks." And so I came in there, and they talked to me, and I told them a little bit about my story. Mm-hmm. And we started practicing after the third song. And you know what? When I accepted to come for that audition, those two before that, I was going around watching other worship teams.
At the different churches?
Just to see what it was about.
Visiting?
Yeah, and what the musicians were doing, how they were reacting, and blah, blah, this and that. Mm-hmm. To learn what that drummer's playing. Mm-hmm. How does he play? Mm-hmm. And I studied that for a while, what was going on, before I decided that's what I needed to do. Okay. But anyway, so I auditioned, and they asked me that stuff. After about the third song, they said, "What are you doing tomorrow?" Mm-hmm. Oh. I said, "I don't have anything really bad." "Well, we want you to play." I said, "I don't know any of your songs." Mm-hmm. "Oh, you'll do just fine." He says, "God will lead you anyway." And they were right. Mm-hmm. So I went in there, and they had a fantastic guitar player that was probably one of the best guitar players around in this county. It's very well known for his playing. After I played the first song, he wasn't there at the audition.
Okay.
Turned around, looked at me, gave me a thumbs up.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I wound up there serving the Lord, not serving myself, serving the Lord with a purpose for 12 years.
Wow.
And within that time, I was the last person to audition for that worship team. And that's how you're supposed to do it. But they seem to start backing off on that. And then I wound up serving over here at Cold Springs because I knew Pastor Frank Gates over here.
Okay.
He led the worship in the homeless camp. Remember when the homeless camp was back over here? He was into the homeless stuff. And I would serve once a month here. The next thing I know, Calvary Chapel over here, Derberly's. Hey, I got Donny over here, blah, blah, blah. So I wound up doing that. So I had to split it up.
So you're like a circuit.
Well, I was serving God.
Yes.
The pastor never questioned me on that over here. And nobody, the elders of the church, or nobody on the worship team questioned that. Solid Rock didn't question that. But boy, this is where I thought the Calvary Chapel was different. And I'm not bad-mouthing them or anything like that. But they would question me why I wasn't there when I was.
The other weeks. Yeah.
And finally, I would explain to them what's going on. So finally, they said, oh, okay, yeah, we get it. That, you do what you need to do. I'm serving God. That's what I'm going to do. And so I do that. And then one time they did it again, so I finally talked with Pastor Nick. You know what Pastor Nick said? Well, I'm not going to interfere with God's work. You do what you got to do. I said, you need to tell them that. Please. And they did. But then I wound up Solid Rock for all the Sundays because I prayed about it, and that's where I started. And I wanted to be of service there. When I make a commitment to the Lord now, it's not 100%, it's 130%. Am I accurate all the time? No.
Right.
I'm just like anybody else.
Right.
I make mistakes. But when I do make the mistakes, I go, oops, immediately. And I ask for forgiveness daily, sometimes 3 or 4 times a day. You know, because I do make those mistakes, getting behind a car, maybe sometimes I get agitated because that person doesn't drive like me. But anyways, my coming back to the Lord, even though I accepted the Lord back when I was 16, I'm 74 now, and had that break away from him, my life has changed tremendously again. God gives me what I need, not what I want. And I'm grateful for that. He doesn't make me a rich man in finances of this world, but he makes me a rich saint, because we all are saints once we accept Christ in his kingdom. And my cup runneth over. And the blessings just keep coming, keep coming. I have this thing now where I have doubts. I get doubts really easy. And he'll hit me with that humor. He'll wait for the perfect timing. God has the most perfect timing, and he'll hit you with that. Not when you want it. He'll just hit you and surprise you and go, I'm so sorry for the doubtfulness. Because all I have is a grain of salt. Maybe not even that much faith, but that's an abundance of faith. And I have to keep my faith, and I have to keep my focus on what he wants me to do, not what I want to do, because self-will gets me in trouble. I'm not that self-centered, righteous person I used to be. I can at times, but I want to serve the Lord in the best ways I know. And I'm so grateful and I'm so gifted that what he's done, not just in my life, the miracles I've seen, what he's done in my daughter's life, the miracles that I see around me happening. You know, if you haven't witnessed a miracle, it's something to see, because if you turn your life over to Christ, you're a miracle. And in abundance, the gifts just keep coming and keep coming. I hope this helps somebody else in their life that having dark, demented times. And I tell you, there's not a day that goes by I don't think about the dark, demented place I was at 24 years ago. and it's not a pleasant place to be, and I never want to be there again. And God has removed that from me, and He can remove it from you. If you ever want to talk, I'm open. Thank you.
Thank you, Donny.